What happened when an undercover CEO stepped into a car wash and uncovered the grime hidden beneath the surface? Welcome, insightful and compassionate viewers. You have a true eye for stories that matter. Today's tale is more than soap and shine. It's about justice, leadership, and standing up for those who've been overlooked. Join us as we follow Ethan Brooks on a powerful undercover journey into his own company, where he exposes toxic management, champions the silent heroes, and proves that true leadership means getting involved. Trust us, you'll want to stick around for this one. Let's dive into the truth behind the bubbles. Ethan Cole sat in his downtown office, rain tapping steadily against the tall glass windows as he scrolled through the latest performance reports from ShineWorks car wash's nationwide branches. Most locations were thriving, rave customer reviews, consistent revenue, and happy employees. But one report caught his eye. Store 1212, a mid-tier suburban branch with a spotless service history. Until recently, over the past 3 months, complaints had spiked dramatically. Long wait times, poor service, rude employees, unexplained staff turnover. Ethan's brow furrowed as he opened an internal survey from that location. One anonymous comment hit him like a punch. "They don't care about us. We're just bodies, not people. The manager plays favorites and punishes anyone who speaks up." This wasn't the company Ethan had built. ShineWorks had started with one location and a dream: to offer not just clean cars, but clean leadership. He prided himself on fairness, second chances, and elevating workers who often got overlooked in other industries. So how had it come to this? How had Store 12 become a place where people felt invisible and abused? Ethan dug deeper, pulling time logs, turnover data, and customer incident reports. A pattern emerged. Employees were having their hours slashed without explanation, write-ups were increasing, and at least 3 exit interviews hinted at retaliation. One even suggested an employee had been fired for challenging the site manager's unethical practices. He called HR. "What's happening at Store 12? A pause on the line. "We've had some internal difficulties," the representative admitted. "But Troy, he's the site manager, says things are under control." "Define under control," Ethan snapped. But the answers were vague, the accountability non-existent. That's when the decision crystallized. If his company's values were being betrayed from within, he couldn't fix it from a boardroom. He had to see it for himself, not as the CEO, but as one of them, a worker, a nobody. He scribbled a name on a notepad: Eric Carson. No LinkedIn, no college degree, just a solid backstory and a clean slate. If Store 12 had lost its way, then Ethan was going to walk through the suds in silence until he found out exactly where it broke. 3 days later, Ethan Cole stood in front of a smudged bathroom mirror in a roadside motel just outside the city. His reflection barely resembled the man who once graced business magazine covers as the face of ShineWorks. Gone was the clean-shaven jawline and tailored blazer. In their place, overgrown stubble, a faded hoodie, and worn jeans 2 sizes too big. His dark hair had been buzzed shorter and dyed a dull brown. He added a cheap baseball cap for good measure and practiced his new name under his breath: Eric Carson. Eric was a former warehouse worker from Kansas City who'd recently relocated after his company folded. Quiet, punctual, no online footprint. Ethan had spent hours crafting the identity with help from his trusted assistant, a former PI who knew how to scrub traces. He'd even gone so far as to create fake employment records and a bare-bones resume with just enough credibility to warrant a temp job at Store 12. No bells, no whistles, just another down-on-his-luck guy looking for honest work. The interview had been a formality, conducted by a rushed assistant manager over the phone. It lasted barely 6 minutes. Ethan, as Eric, was offered the job almost immediately. "Can you start Monday?" "We're short-handed," the manager grumbled. No background check, no questions about skills, just desperation masked as efficiency. Ethan packed a duffel bag with thrifted work clothes, a pair of steel-toe boots, and a water bottle. He left his wedding ring on the nightstand. This wasn't just undercover, it was immersion. If he wanted the truth, he couldn't carry even a sliver of his old self into that lot. As he zipped up the duffel and turned off the light, he glanced at the mirror one last time. Eric Carson was ready. And so was Ethan for whatever he'd find beneath the soap spray and silence at ShineWorks Store 12. The morning Ethan, now Eric Carson, arrived at ShineWorks Store 12, the sky hung low with thick gray clouds, as if mirroring the weight in his chest. The car wash sat on the corner of a cracked strip mall, flanked by a shuttered bakery and a pawn shop with flickering signage. He parked around the back, away from the security cameras, and walked toward the employee entrance with slow, steady steps. The building, once pristine under the brand's early expansion phase, looked worn, faded paint, a dented bay door, and a handwritten sign warning no loitering during breaks. A tall, wiry man in his 20s, with a greasy cap and a clipboard, met him at the side door. "You the new guy?" he asked, not waiting for a response. "Name's Rico. Floor lead. Come on, let's get this over with." He handed Eric a stained shirt bearing the ShineWorks logo, a faded yellow smiley sun above a water droplet. "You'll be in the tunnel in Vax. Don't mess with the cash or the customers. That's manager only." Rico's voice was flat, mechanical, like someone who had long since given up on being heard. Inside, the staff lounge was dim and cramped, with mismatched chairs, a single microwave with a "Do Not Slam" sign, and a bulletin board cluttered with outdated safety posters and half-torn schedules. No introductions, no welcome, just a nod from a woman in her 40s sweeping the break room floor and a muttered "good luck" from a teenager passing by. The manager, a broad-shouldered man with a clipboard and permanent scowl, didn't bother to meet Ethan that day. "He's busy," Rico said with a shrug. "You'll meet him if you screw up." Ethan took his place by the vacuums, grabbing a hose and getting to work, pretending not to notice how the other workers avoided eye contact, or how the music on the loudspeakers only partially drowned out the tension humming in the air. Within the first hour, he knew this wasn't just a rough workplace. It was a neglected one. And the truth was only beginning to surface. Over the next few days, Ethan, still operating under the name Eric Carson, blended into the rhythms of ShineWorks Store 12. The hum of dryers, the squelch of wet vacs, and the whir of rotating brushes became his soundtrack. But behind the mechanical noise was something far more troubling. A human system fraying at the seams. He noticed it in the way the shifts were scheduled, young, inexperienced workers on prime hours with easy duties, while older or more seasoned employees were routinely assigned the hardest stations, pre-scrub detailing, underbody wash, or manual vacuum bays in 100-degree heat. Breaks were inconsistent, lunch hours skipped, and complaints met with shrugs or subtle retaliation. Rico, the floor lead, seemed to carry invisible shackles, capable and sharp, yet visibly burnt out. One morning, after being chewed out for not moving fast enough during a customer rush, Rico muttered under his breath, "Doesn't matter what you do. He only notices when you mess up." Ethan asked, "He?" Rico tilted his head toward the manager's office. "Leo, don't get on his radar, you'll regret it." That same day, Ethan saw a veteran staff member named Paul, mid-50s. Methodical but slower, berated for lagging behind, even though he had just covered a double shift the day before. Ethan watched as Paul cleaned a truck's undercarriage in silence, fatigue heavy in every motion. Not one coworker spoke up. Worse, customer complaints were deflected. One elderly woman returned with damage to her bumper, but the manager dismissed it with, "She should have read the waiver." A younger, well-dressed man with a luxury SUV, given a free wax and 2 vouchers? Ethan quietly noted the imbalance. Favoritism. Didn't stop with employees. It extended to customers too. Even in the break room, morale was paper thin. An employee survey box sat in the corner, unopened and dusty, its slot taped shut. When Ethan mentioned it to a teen worker named Luis, he laughed. "That thing? Might as well write your complaints on toilet paper." Everywhere Ethan turned, he saw the rot. Not in the equipment, but in the culture. And worst of all, everyone seemed to accept it. Not because they agreed with it, but because speaking up only ever made things worse. But Ethan hadn't come to accept. He had come to expose. The breaking point came on a scorching Thursday afternoon. A long line of vehicles snaked through the ShineWorks lot, the midday sun bouncing off windshields as customers fanned themselves impatiently. Ethan, now used to the grueling rhythm, was stationed at the drying zone with Rico and Paul. Despite the oppressive heat and no scheduled breaks, they moved quickly, rags in hand, sweat pouring, dodging the erratic spray from the malfunctioning rinse station. That's when it happened. A luxury SUV rolled in, custom paint jobs, rims gleaming, clearly someone used to VIP treatment. Ethan was wiping down the rear windshield when he overheard the conversation between the driver and Leo, the store manager. The customer, sharply dressed and clearly agitated, pointed out a scratch on his door panel. "This wasn't here before. I expect this to be handled." Leo didn't even hesitate. "Of course, sir, we'll take care of it, free detailing and a refund." Ethan watched in disbelief as Leo ushered the man into the office. Less than an hour ago, Paul had approached Leo about a recurring shoulder injury and asked if he could rotate to an easier task for the next shift. Leo had scoffed, muttered something about getting soft, and told him to suck it up. The hypocrisy was sickening. But what truly ignited the fire came minutes later. The next car was an older woman in a battered sedan. She stepped out, polite but concerned. "I think my rearview mirror's come loose. It was steady before." Rico stepped forward to inspect it, but Leo intercepted. "Sorry, ma'am, pre-existing damage. We're not responsible." She tried to argue, clearly flustered, but he waved her off and walked away. No refund, no inspection, no decency. Paul nearby clenched his fists. "She deserved better," he muttered. Leo spun around, having heard it. "You got something to say, Paul?" Paul's jaw tightened, but he stood his ground. "I've been here 6 years, Leo. I've seen how you treat people. Enough." A hush fell over the staff. The air vibrated with tension. Leo's response was swift and brutal. "Pack your stuff. You're done." Silence. Then Louis, the teenage detailer, stepped forward. "You can't fire him for speaking up." Leo snapped. "Want to join him?" That was it. Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding, unable to stay silent any longer. "You've crossed a line," his voice cut through the heat like ice. "This ends today." Though he hadn't revealed his identity yet, the command in his tone was unmistakable. Everyone turned toward him. Paul stood stunned. Leo's eyes narrowed. The moment hung in the air like a spark waiting to catch. And Ethan knew this was the fire that would burn the old system down. After the confrontation on the lot, Ethan knew he couldn't delay any longer. That evening, once the last car had rolled out and the bay doors clanged shut, he stayed behind under the pretense of finishing closing duties. In reality, he began scouring the employee records and scheduling logs kept in the cluttered back office. He unearthed a pattern of deliberate manipulation. Paul's hours had been slashed progressively over the last few months after raising concerns about safety. Several others, Luis, Rico, even a senior worker named Tammy, had seen similar reductions after minor disputes with Leo or pushing back on unfair treatment. Ethan took photos of the files, documenting notes scribbled in the margins like "talks too much" or "not a team player," all aimed at justifying punishment without paper trails. He also found a folder labeled "Temperex Do Not Promote." Inside were applications from long-term part-timers, many of them older workers or single parents who had been with ShineWorks for years but were inexplicably passed over for benefits and advancement. One resume stood out, Tammy's. Her record boasted a spotless attendance history and strong customer feedback, yet next to her name was a handwritten note, "Too opinionated, not a good face for the brand." But the most damning discovery came in a locked drawer that Ethan managed to pop open with a flathead key from the janitor's closet. Inside was a printed email exchange between Leo and a regional supervisor discussing limiting liability by not allowing injured workers to formally report incidents. One line chilled Ethan. "If they don't fill out a report, it's like it didn't happen. Keep it verbal unless it's serious." This was no longer just a toxic manager. It was a coordinated pattern of cover-ups, discrimination, and abuse. Ethan sat in the flickering fluorescent light, the weight of the evidence heavy in his hands. He took a breath and quietly copied everything onto a flash drive he'd tucked into his sock earlier. As he locked the door behind him and stepped into the still night air, He glanced back at the car wash's dark silhouette. This wasn't just about bad management anymore. It was a betrayal of the values he had built the company on. And come morning, he was going to make damn sure everyone knew the truth. The morning buzz at ShineWorks car wash began like any other, hoses hissing, vacuums roaring, and team members groggily clocking in for their shifts. But just before the first customer pulled into the drive-through bay, a message crackled over the intercom. All staff to the break room for a mandatory meeting. Confused glances were exchanged, especially from Leo, who looked irritated at the disruption. Inside the cramped break room, workers gathered around the sticky folding table, eyes darting between each other. Ethan stood by the whiteboard, no longer in his coveralls, but in a crisp button-down and polished shoes. His posture was different. Taller, steady, commanding. "Some of you know me as Eric, the quiet new guy," he began. "But that wasn't the full story." He paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. "My name's Ethan Riley. I'm the founder and CEO of ShineWorks." The room fell completely still. A bottle of cleaning solution clattered to the floor and rolled under a chair. Leo's smirk dissolved into a pale, frozen grimace. "I came here undercover," Ethan said, "because I'd received reports, anonymous complaints, high turnover, a drop in morale, and I needed to see for myself what was really happening here." He opened a folder and pulled out several printed sheets, pinning them to the whiteboard one by one. Shift schedules that showed favoritism, handwritten notes from Leo that docked hours without warning, a printed email referencing verbal-only injury reports. "These aren't a few minor issues," Ethan said. "This is systemic abuse of power." Leo stepped forward, voice cracking. "You misunderstood. Those notes weren't—" Ethan raised a hand, silencing him. "I heard how you spoke to your team. I watched you cut hours to punish people. I saw you humiliate a loyal worker in front of everyone. Don't insult me by pretending it was anything else." He turned to the staff. "Effective immediately, Leo is relieved of his position. He'll be escorted off the premises today. And every single one of you who's been overlooked, ignored, or silenced, you deserve better." Gasps turned into murmurs. Paul's eyes widened in disbelief. Tammy clutched her coffee cup, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. Ethan continued, "We're restructuring the store with input from those who've actually been doing the work. I'm appointing an interim leadership team from within, people who've earned respect, not demanded it." He looked around the room, his voice softening. "This isn't just about fixing a broken store. It's about restoring the dignity that was taken from all of you. And for the first time in a long while, the air at ShineWorks felt lighter, not just because a tyrant had fallen, but because the truth had finally been spoken out loud." The following days at ShineWorks Car Wash felt like a fresh breeze after a storm. Employees arrived earlier than usual, not out of fear, but curiosity. Rumors of change had proven true, and now everyone waited to see what would happen next. Ethan didn't hide behind a desk. He showed up on the ground with the crew, chatting with each employee and asking for honest feedback. On Thursday morning, a new schedule was posted, one built with transparency and fairness. Paul blinked twice when he saw his name listed with a full 40-hour week for the first time in months. At lunch, Ethan gathered everyone once more. "This team's been running despite the obstacles, not because of leadership. That ends now," he said. Then he turned to Tammy. "You've led by example, covering shifts without complaint, guiding new hires, and supporting coworkers, even when no one acknowledged you. I'd like to formally offer you the role of assistant site manager." Gasps and smiles rippled through the room. Tammy's eyes welled with emotion. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan replied, smiling. "We need more leaders like you." He wasn't done. Paul was named team lead for operations, and Rosa, the overnight cleaner who'd never missed a shift in 2 years, was assigned to head training for new hires. For the first time, recognition wasn't about titles. It was about trust, effort, and heart. And those who had carried the car wash through its darkest days were finally stepping into the light. Restoring the culture at ShineWorks Car Wash wasn't just about firing a toxic manager or promoting a few deserving team members. It was about rebuilding trust from the inside out. Ethan knew that policies meant little without genuine change in the day-to-day experience of his staff. He began with a listening tour, sitting down with every employee, day shift, night shift, even part-timers, to hear their stories, frustrations, and ideas. Many were hesitant at first, unsure if their voices would actually be heard this time, but as Ethan followed up on their suggestions, fixing the ventilation in the locker room, ordering ergonomic mats, and reinstating proper break schedules, skepticism began to fade. Weekly meetings were introduced, not for performance drills, but as open forums where any employee could bring up concerns or suggestions without fear of backlash. Tammy, now assistant site manager, led many of these with a calm authority that earned her respect across departments. Paul organized hands-on workshops where veteran employees helped new hires learn the nuances of the wash cycle, tire detailing, and customer interaction. Rosa launched a quiet hero board in the break room, where employees could anonymously shout out coworkers for small acts of kindness or teamwork, something that quickly became a source of pride. Small changes had a big impact. Customers began noticing too, where once they were rushed out the bay door, now they were greeted with genuine smiles and offered air fresheners or simple car care tips. The mood in the bays had shifted. Laughter replaced muttering, and shifts no longer felt like a countdown to escape. Ethan introduced a new slogan, printed on team t-shirts and the office wall. "We don't just clean cars, we respect people." It wasn't a rebranding, it was a reminder. In a workplace that had once operated under fear, fairness had returned. The culture at ShineWorks was no longer driven by intimidation. It was powered by dignity, cooperation, and the kind of leadership that led by listening. And every member of the team now knew they were part of something worth showing up for. Standing by the edge of the wash bay as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Ethan Brooks watched water bead and roll off a freshly cleaned car. But his focus wasn't on the vehicle. It was on the team inside. Laughter echoed from the break room. Tammy was reviewing the next week's schedule with two newer hires. Paul was coaching a teenager on proper drying techniques. Rosa passed around homemade empanadas as a thank you for a team member's birthday. The atmosphere was calm, energized, and above all, human. Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. Just weeks ago, this same place had been gripped by fear and resentment. Workers tiptoed through shifts, scared of voicing concerns. Good people were silenced or driven out. And the worst part, it had all happened under his nose. But walking in their shoes, seeing the broken system from the inside, had given Ethan clarity that no boardroom report ever could. Real leadership wasn't about distance or dominance. It was about presence, empathy, and accountability. It was about noticing the invisible, standing up for the quiet voices, and never assuming respect is owed, it must be earned. He glanced at the ShineWorks logo gleaming under the floodlights and smiled. They weren't just washing cars anymore. They were building something stronger than polish. A culture of fairness, pride, and purpose. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but it was clear, and this time Ethan wasn't driving it alone. The story of Ethan Brooks and ShineWorks Car Wash offers a powerful lesson in leadership, accountability, and empathy. It reveals how even the most well-intentioned companies can drift away from their values when oversight fades and toxic management takes root. Ethan believed in fairness, but it wasn't until he stepped into the shoes of his frontline workers that he truly understood the damage being done. By going undercover, he saw firsthand how fear, favoritism, and silence had replaced respect, dignity, and teamwork. More importantly, he realized that real change doesn't come from policies alone. It requires presence, listening, and a willingness to confront hard truths. The transformation of ShineWorks began not with a press release, but with simple acts of recognition, inclusion, and justice. It reminded everyone that every worker deserves to feel seen, heard, and valued. When leadership chooses humility over hierarchy, and when culture is rooted in trust instead of fear, even the most broken workplace can be rebuilt. The lesson is clear. Integrity isn't measured in how a company looks from the outside, but in how it treats the people who hold it up from within. And sometimes, the only way forward is by getting your hands dirty together.